started out as just a person in show business because I was in a small town in Pennsylvania and I didn't know how to get out of that small town. But I had taken tap dance lessons and I was working in a factory when all of my friends were in college. And I really practiced my boopy off doing the dancing. So I found a very inexpensive basement room in Queens. And in those days, you could go into any of the offices that did show business things, that did variety acts. And every day I beat the pavement. And every now and again, I got a job. So I was very lucky that I had heard about the Actors Studio. I auditioned for the Actors Studio. I got in. The Actors Studio was free, which was amazing. You got in by auditioning and being good, and there were the most wonderful people involved. Cheryl Crawford and Elia Kazan, and of course Lee Strasberg was the teacher, and he was very highly thought of, and Bobby Lewis. And then it was like an overnight miracle because the Actors Studio was so important then because of Marlon Brando and Eva Marie Saint and Eli Wallach and Carl Malden and Millie Dunnick, all these wonderful people. So the word went out, and I got immediately a Broadway show called All Summer Long. And suddenly everybody in Hollywood wanted me. And they came to New York and they did screen tests of me. Well, I was terrified. I mean, I hadn't even been acting that long. And to do a movie, and they were offering me starring parts. So I said to Jack, look, I can't keep turning this down because it won't always be there, but I'm terrified. He said, well, then choose the director. He said, go with a great director. And that's why I chose Giant, and I was introduced in Giant. And then, of course, from there, I did Baby Doll, and we're off and running. I was auditioned for Baby Doll by Kazan and Williams, and Kazan immediately liked me for the part. Williams said, well, she's a lovely girl, but I would like to see her gain 20 pounds and have big patches of rouge on her face. So Kazan looked at him and said, Tennessee, you already write bizarre characters. So we can't put bizarre on top of bizarre. I want somebody who's a real human being, and then we'll let them be bizarre. So that's how it turned out. Kazan said it was his sexiest film. And there were people that were very disappointed that I did Baby Doll because I played such a pure ingenue in Giant. And so there were a lot of people who wanted me to continue in that mode. When I look back on it now, I say that I didn't get enough credit for the sexual scenes that I did because I don't think anybody else has come up with the swing scene in Baby Doll. I don't think anybody else has come up with that passion that I showed with Jimmy Stewart in How the West Was Won. When I first went to Hollywood, I was signed to Warner Brothers, and being a studio actress was so very, very, very different than it is today. For one thing, it was more humane because you'd get up at 7 in the morning and drive to the studio. They'd give you breakfast. You could take a shower. You did wonderful makeup and hair. Then you actually had an hour off for lunch. And the women were always photographed first and beautifully with the light in the eye. And so they don't even bother to make a woman look good today. So you finished at 5 o'clock and you still had lots of energy. And so you could go home, take off your makeup, have a swim, be with your children, have a lovely dinner with your family. Today, you are lucky if you worked less than 16 hours a day. Lunch does not exist. Oh, it had great merits. For one thing, they did all your fan mail. They did all your publicity. They protected you in every way. It's like when I did the story of Jean Harlow, I could not find out any of the truth about Jean Harlow because they made everything up. My mother thought that she was an aristocrat, and that isn't true. And people in Hollywood would come up to me, very protective of Jean, and say, "Oh, don't you dare play her as a drunk. She wasn't a drunk. So she liked her glass of vodka once in a while, but she was not a drunk." And they were telling me how to play the part and so forth because you were presented to the public the way the studio wanted to present you to the public, and they knew nothing about your personal life. Today, unfortunately, we know too much about personal lives that maybe we don't even want to know. I was in love with Clark Gable because I think I was 11 when I went to the movies by myself and saw him. It was my first erotic experience as a girl. I loved the way that he would take a woman and put her in a backbend kiss. And, you know, when I say this in front of audiences, all the women go, "Yeah." So working with him was just a dream of mine come true. And when he kissed me and held me in a backbend kiss, they had to help me off the set. I really thought I was going to faint. So he took me aside. You know, that was his third to the last film that he made. So he was quite an old man, and he didn't work even after lunch. But he came to me and he gave me a talking to. And he said, "Carroll, look," he said, "you know, you're a young actress and you're going to do movies with very attractive men. But I have to tell you, darling, that we're not the characters we play on screen. You know, we get stomach aches, we have gas, we have sometimes false teeth." He says, "So whenever you do a love scene, yes, of course, you must do it as realistically as possible. But the minute it's over, walk away. Go and get a cup of coffee, make a phone call, go to the bathroom, do anything, but do not linger with that in your mind." And years later, I realized, although it was very kind of him to help a young actress that way, he was really doing it to protect himself. But I did fight not to do sexy roles. And I was always on suspension at Warner Brothers, which I couldn't afford. I was getting $750 a week, not anything like they get today. And then, because I didn't want to do these sexy little Southern girls who were a poor imitation of what Tennessee Williams had written, they finally came to me and they said, "Okay, we have got the part for you. You can be a nun. We're going to put you in a movie called The Miracle." I said, "Well, that's wonderful. Finally." So she wasn't a nun, she was a postulate. And she was in the convent for like 5 minutes in the movie when Roger Moore came riding by on a white horse and took her into the forest and had her. And then she became the biggest whore that there ever was in all of Europe. She had bullfighters, she had artists, just you name it, she had it. From one scene after another, she had all these men. So it wasn't really a very pure postulate. Jack was an excellent director, and he had been called the new Orson Welles because of the stage work that he's done as a young man. And Alex Carmel was a friend of ours. And also, we couldn't afford to buy from anybody. So Alex was very happy that we were doing his work. It was a very interesting time because they were just at the very beginning of making independent films. And United Artists was one of the companies that really encouraged it. Of course, they wanted you to make it on a skeleton budget, but if you could do the story that you wanted to do and have the people that you wanted to have, it was great. But it was kind of stingy. I mean, I had to count the bobby pins so that I wouldn't use too many in my hair. Oh, Ralph was a lovely guy, really lovely. And I don't think he'd worked too much up to that point, and he was very happy to have the part. He is a sympathetic character, and also Ralph has a personal charm, and it shows through. I always use what I think is the method. Everybody has their own sort of interpretation of it. The training at the Actors Studio really did help, yes. Of course, the girl has to take a shower and scrub herself down, and she becomes distraught, and it's been copied ever since. There are shows all the time, even on television, where they show a rape victim, and it's always the same thing. I suppose it's the Stockholm Syndrome, isn't it? And if you're with somebody long enough, I suppose you get used to that life. I mean, I don't know. I hate to think of myself living in that room with that man, but where Ralph Meeker kept me a prisoner, that had to be a set. It was just like one room. We couldn't be fancy. We were so thrilled that Aaron Copland, we showed him the film. He was nice enough to sit through it, and he said he loved it. And he loved especially things like the bridge scene. And then when he agreed to do it, by the way, he got full pay. And then I had to pay that back by doing another film for United Artists, and they took Aaron Copland's salary out of my salary. But we were so thrilled that he did it. And you know, he sat in that screening room and he would watch a scene over and over and over again. And we were just so worried about him. But that's the way he loved to do it. Jack went into United Artists afterwards and he said, let's talk about the publicities. They said, no, you're too small to bother with. They said that to him. Publicity is very important. Showing the trailer when other films are showing in movie houses, we had none of that. They were just hoping for a sleeper that would just catch on. Today, I'm always surprised when people come up and suddenly say, oh, well, but this is such an important film, because at the time I was disappointed at the way it was received. It's wonderful when there's something that you don't expect. I had to refuse so many films where they wanted me to play these little sex pots, and always from the South. So time had passed, and I had done everything other than a sexy role. I'd done a lot of great westerns, worked with wonderful directors, and stayed away from sexy parts. And then it was toward the end of my career when I was offered the Carpetbaggers, and I thought, oh, this is such a fun part. After all that I've done since Baby Doll, nobody's going to call me a sex symbol. Well, that isn't what happened. I really broke new ground in the Carpetbaggers because I was the aggressive female. I mean, I was helped, of course, by Harold Robbins, but I took that on, made that mine. All my films are tops. I got to work with Gregory Peck, Charlton Heston, Jimmy Stewart. I mean, how good can life get?